Hello and welcome to the 75th episode of PCB podcast. And today we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Mike Hesson, who is the Pakistan men's white ball head coach. Hello, Mike. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thanks, Nazir. Good to be here.
And you were in New Zealand back then. So tell us how you are here and how's the white ball camp going on?
Yeah, look, white ball camp's going well. It was a good chance for us to look at some new players. Obviously some players perform well in the PSL and have been recognised with a chance to come into the NCA. We've also, got a few older players who are not involved in red ball cricket who we wanted to see where they were at around potential selection in the ODI squad. And as I said, just trying to grow the group. There's a lot of players playing Grade 2 cricket as well who we would have liked to have brought in, who have been unavailable, but ultimately we're starting to get a bigger and a broader look at the players we have available.
Right, and talking about the white ball cricket, you have just completed your 1 year with the Pakistan cricket team. So we have seen that in the last 3 ICC events, we couldn't qualify for the Super 8 events. But in the last T20I World Cup, which was your first ICC event, we did manage to qualify for the Super 8. So how do you see the team's evolving situation? Like how is the team developing into a very good side for in the white ball cricket?
Look, there's a lot of work to do. We certainly made good progress from a T20 perspective. Within that year, we went from 23% win ratio to 73, so an improvement of obviously 50% increase. But we've still got work to do. We've been pretty disappointing in T20 cricket. During that period, that the 12 months before that, we'd lost to Ireland, the USA, Zimbabwe. We'd won a lot of series. And in the World Cup, we're probably, Harry Brook's innings probably took us away from a semi-final spot, but we were only probably 4 or 5 runs away from making the semi-finals. So it shows good signs of progress, although, we're disappointed we didn't progress further.
And just coming back again to the white ball, NCA white ball camp, which has just concluded in Lahore, we have seen that now the players are going to feature in the ODI series. So how do you see this camp, like considering like you have one series coming up and then we have a gap between the series?
Look, I think with one-day cricket, with the World Cup in mind, in a year and a half, we have to widen the group. So rather than the same players always being selected, the ODI squad is a work in progress. And there's a number of areas we need to develop, and we need to make sure come the World Cup in a year and a half that we've actually got the best squad. And, so today, the last 2 weeks have been a good chance for us to identify some of that new talent, challenge them against some of the existing stuff or existing players, and work out where the gaps are, because some of these young guys are promising, but, still got a lot of work to do.
And then again, we have seen that you guys had a one-on-one session with the players. So tell us something about that one-on-one sessions with the players during the camp.
Yeah, look, one of the things I've noticed since being in Pakistan is, players are in different places. They're with their domestic team, they're at the NCA, they're with the Shaheens national team, and often getting lots of different messages. So a big part of these IPPs or one-on-one meetings is involving all the NCA staff, the physios, the trainers, everybody in one room with the player and agreeing on these are the things that we want the players to work on and how we're going to do it. So whether a player's with the national team or they're injured or they go back to the NCA coaches are working on the same things. So therefore the players don't get caught with mixed messaging and we can actually progress them. Too many players I think have been stagnant in terms of their development because they've just got lost in a little hole, and certainly we're working really hard with the NCA to make sure that doesn't happen.
And talking about the NCA, we have seen that recently we had a red ball camp as well with the coaches. So how do you see the NCA coaches working with the white ball team management?
Look, I think it's around consistency and it's around having, sharing lots of ideas, but then ultimately delivering one message to the players. And that's the key thing from a white ball perspective is the role that the player's playing. Often, we'd be looking at a player, let's say like a Khawaja Nafe, who's we see as a potential middle order batter who can keep, and then all of a sudden he'll be playing domestically as an opening batter and won't be keeping. He'll play for the Shaheens and he'll bat 3 and not keeping. So it's like if we all identify a particular player, that's just an example, we need to all work on the same thing. So that player has got a chance of progressing and potentially pushing their case for ODI selection in the future.
And talking about the youngsters, as you mentioned about Khawaja Nafe, So how do you see the youngsters? Like we have a World Cup coming up like after 18 months. So how do you see these youngsters coming in the side as you have given a big opportunity to some of the youngsters like in the previous series we have seen against Bangladesh, players like Shamil Hussain, Ghazi Ghauri. So how do you see them progressing to the national side?
Yeah, I mean, Maz Sadakat is another one who we've introduced in ODI cricket. He's probably had his biggest success in T20s, but I think in one-day cricket it's a nice chance to introduce him. The likes of Shamil Hussain, who had a difficult tour of Bangladesh, but we have to realise new players coming in, sometimes it takes a little bit of time. And these players have excelled domestically. They've pushed their case for opportunity, and then we have to have the patience to give them enough opportunity. From the PSL, there was a number, obviously, Samir Minhas, Arafat Minhas, Fahan Yusuf, Ali Raza, Abdul Subhan, who didn't play a lot, but all of these are guys that have, either played under 19 or, are still sort of early 20s who have pushed their case. And we see that they've got some skill that we need to try and develop. And ultimately, we need to test them against the existing players to see, whether they're going to usurp them in time and whether they need further opportunities.
Yeah. And as I just mentioned about the ICC Men's World Cup, which is 18 months away. So how do you see these players and some of the existing players, like what they need to do to step up and to perform well in the ICC event?
Look, I think our one-day side is a side that, we haven't really played a lot the last 12 months, but what we have done is expose some key areas. From a bowling perspective, we've got to bowl far tighter lines than we have and be more consistent with the ball. Especially in the power play, we need, we've really struggled to take wickets in the power play in ODI cricket, and that's something that, we're going to have to find bowlers that are really consistent and able to do that. Through the middle overs is around, as I said, being really disciplined with the ball, and that's in all conditions. That's not just on flat wickets or turning wickets. That's, what bowlers can we find that can do that job. From a batting point of view, the middle overs, we have to be more efficient. We often leave too much to do at the end of the innings because we're a little bit passive through the middle overs. So, we need to find batters through those middle overs. Salman Ali Agha's been exceptional. He averaged close to 50 in ODI cricket, but we need to give some support around that, and we need to be, far busier in those middle overs than we have been, and that'll make life easier for the finishers. So that, there's some key work-ons there. I think from a fielding point of view, our fielding coach, Shane McDermott has done an excellent job in making the players aware, but we have to increase the fitness levels so that we can keep that intensity. And that's certainly something that, the next, 2 to 3 months are going to be critical for us to do that.
And what about the fast bowlers? We do have Shaheen Shah Afridi leading the ODI side. How do you see the other fast bowlers, like to have a good pace and a good bowling attack?
Yeah, same thing. Like we've got a lot of bowlers who overall have pretty good records in ODIs, but we have to be more consistent, and, ODI cricket is about limiting opportunities for the opposition. It doesn't mean that you put it there. You still have to swing it, you still have to bowl fast, but you can't be a scattergun either. And we have to be far more accurate in our execution, We've got guys like, Haris Rauf, Naseem Shah, Ahmed Danielle, as I talked about Subhan. There are, Salman Mirza is progressing as a white ball bowler. We've got lots of guys that have had opportunities, but we all need to get better. Shaheen Shah, we need to get more wickets in the power play. So as a bowling unit, Shaheen's well aware that we need to be more efficient. And then from a spin perspective as well, we've got, Abrar Ahmed, who's bowled really nicely and probably been the best of our ODI bowlers in recent times. He needs some more support.
And spinners like Sufyan Mukim, you have seen in the nets as well. Yeah.
Like Sufyan's got to make the transition from T20s to one-dayers, which is a massive change. Sufyan's had an excellent PSL in this camp. He's been challenged because the demands are a lot different. You have different fields. You're obviously only allowed one less fielder out. You have to be far more consistent in what you do. And, when you've got guys like that, there's really only one spot for a pure spinner. You've got spin bowling all-rounders who have to bat 6, 7, 8. Sufyan, Abra, Faisal Akram. These are guys that are competing for one place. And there's some real competition in that spot, but we need more from the bowling all-rounders as well. ODI cricket is about scores of 300, 320 plus. You've got to have some cricketers at 7 and 8 who can at least contribute. But firstly, are very good with one skill. They have to be, all of our bowlers, 9, 10, 11, have to be able to hold a bat. You don't see any other teams in the world where those guys can't contribute and at least manoeuvre the ball to help the batting lineup. So there's a lot of skills that need to develop sort of throughout the whole group.
And what about the Pakistan Shaheens? Have you talked to some of the coaching staff of the Pakistan Shaheens that the players are coming in? So how do you see these players coming into the side?
Well, that's where that consistency goes, and the Shaheens coaches and the NCA coaches, and we have to all be on the same page. So, there's a really good gap after this Australian series where we'll be holding camps, but also, potentially some Shaheens tours where I'll be going on as well and working with these players under pressure, seeing how they go, whether they show the skills that are going to be required for them to step up, potentially be involved in a World Cup in a year and a half.
And just we have seen that Pakistan team did really well against Australia when they were here for the T20I series. So the upcoming ODI series, how do you see the players? Like what results are you looking for the team in the series?
Look, I think, with the likes of Fakhar Zaman and Saim Ayub, Usman Khan all sort of being out, it gives some opportunities for us to look at some younger ones, particularly in the batting side. They'll be exposed to an Australian side who'll be hurting from their performance over here last time. Their squad looks strong, and they'll be coming over here. ODI cricket is probably one of their stronger formats at the moment. That group's certainly probably better than their T20 at the moment. And I guess there needs to be a little bit of patience with some of these younger players because sure, it would be great if they come in straight away and perform, but reality in international cricket is not everybody can do that. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time to feel that you're confident enough to perform. Someone like Abdul Samad, who's had one tour, played a handful of innings, a really promising finisher in a role that's incredibly difficult. Batting in the middle lower order in ODI cricket is really an experienced player's job. Newer players that need some experience. There'll be a number of, especially from a batting point of view. So there needs to be a little bit of patience with those guys. Like if we're looking for the World Cup in a year and a half, we're obviously trying to win the series, no doubt. But there'll be some younger players trying to find their feet on the international stage. So it's exciting. It's exciting to see some players under a bit of pressure and showing the world their skills. Someone like Abdul Samad, who's doing a role that's really difficult. Batting in the middle order. Trying to close the innings out. It's generally a role that an experienced player takes on. Samad's played a handful of games, but we see some real skill in him. And we think that he can develop quickly into that role. So really looking forward to seeing him along with some other players develop.
And talking about the World Cup, which is 18 months away, we know that it's going to be held in Zimbabwe, South Africa and Namibia. So are you guys planning to have a series before that World Cup to give players to acclimatize to the conditions over there? Yeah,
look, we've already looking at scheduling some tours in those places. We already have, but that hasn't been announced yet. But absolutely, I guess the challenge with selecting a squad for those three venues is that they're very different. There's a lot of talk about the World Cup is in South Africa. Even within South Africa, there are different venues. Someone like Paarl is slow in turns. Namibia is slow in turns. Depends in Zimbabwe whether you're Bulawayo, where it's slow in turns, or you're in Harare, where there's a little bit more bounce. We can't just pick a side thinking we're always going to play in, Joburg or Pretoria because the conditions will be very different. So our squad will have to be able to adapt to playing in all of those conditions.
And continuing with the white ball cricket, after the series against Australia, we will have a 3 months gap. The red ball team will be playing in West Indies and England. But are you planning to have some camps or something like that during that time period?
Yeah, well, there will be camps starting straight after the Australian series. They'll be bringing in different players, from a white ball perspective. There'll be some, an extended test players involved as well, from what I understand. But our focus will very much be one-day cricket. And then, as I said, we'll put around that the Shaheen's program. And there'll be some players obviously doing a camp, and then they'll go and play and come back. And we'll have all of our coaching staff around as well. So, all of the white ball staff live in Pakistan, which is quite different than, some previous regimes. And that's something that allows us to actually work longer term with these players and try and develop them leading up to the World Cup.
And talking about the league cricket, which is very important, like we have seen our players competing in other leagues. They also play in the HBL, PSL. Most of the foreign players also come and play in HBL, PSL. How do you see this league cricket, and how do you see our players going and playing in different league cricket?
Look, I think it depends on the stage of evolution for that player. Some players need experience overseas. Some of your younger developing players, you don't want the first time they play an international in Sri Lanka or Dubai or Australia, and that be the only time they've ever played in that country. So within our Shaheen's program, or within potentially other leagues where we can, encourage them to go and play, they can get that experience. There are also players that need skill development, and going on those series is not a good thing. So we look at each player individually. We've allowed a lot of players to go and play. Some of the more experienced players to play in the NatWest Blast. Your Hesson Ali, Fahim Ashraf, Mo Ali, even Akif Javed. These guys going over there and getting experience playing in a highly competitive situation. So then when they come back, they're ready to go. Whereas sometimes a player who has potentially a technical issue or something like that, we need to evolve their game and then be able to give them playing opportunities.
And yes, and last question regarding the fans. We have seen that unfortunately they couldn't come in the most of the matches at the HBL, PSL, but they have been like supporting the team for the many years. So how do you see these fans behind the team, and they expect a lot from the team? So any message for the fans? You need to look into the camera.
Look, I think expectation is fantastic, and I think that Pakistan fans are incredibly supportive, but they're also critical, and rightfully so at times. But I think what I ask is that this series, great opportunity, as I said, to expose a few new players. Be patient with them. Be incredibly supportive of them. Incredibly supportive of Pakistan. We know we're playing Australia. And they are a very good side, and we will be highly competitive. The challenge for us is to win the series. So please turn up, support us. We love all the support you give us.
Thank you, Mike, for joining us for this episode of PCB Podcast, and all the best for the Australia series. That is all we had in this episode of PCB Podcast.